You've been praying for a way out. Maybe not out loud, maybe not even consciously, but somewhere deep in your spirit, in those 3 a.m. moments when sleep won't come and your chest feels like it's filled with concrete, you've been whispering to God, I can't do this anymore. Please, show me the way. And here's what I need you to understand today. He heard you. Not only did he hear you, he's already answering. Right now. In ways you might not recognize yet. In ways that look like chaos, but are actually choreography. In ways that feel like your world is falling apart when really, finally, the prison walls are crumbling. But here's the problem. When you've been in the fog of narcissistic abuse for months or years, you lose the ability to see clearly. You've been gaslit so thoroughly that you don't trust your own perception anymore. You've been conditioned to doubt every instinct, question every feeling, dismiss every sign. So when God starts moving, when he starts orchestrating your liberation, you might miss it entirely. Or worse, you might resist it. Because freedom, after captivity, can feel terrifying. Not today. Today, I'm going to show you 7 hidden signs that God is actively setting you free from the narcissist in your life. These aren't coincidences. These aren't random events. These are divine interventions disguised as ordinary moments. Some of these signs will feel uncomfortable. Some will feel like loss before they feel like freedom. But every single one is evidence that your prayers are being answered, even when the answer doesn't look like what you expected. If you've been waiting for permission to leave, for confirmation that you're not crazy, for a sign from heaven that it's time, this is it. Sign number 1. The fog is lifting. When you start seeing what you couldn't see before. The first sign is subtle, but it changes everything. You start seeing clearly. For months, maybe years, you've been living in a fog. The narcissist created it, through gaslighting, through manipulation, through slowly, systematically distorting your reality until you couldn't tell up from down. You questioned your own memory. You apologized for things you didn't do. You believed their version of events even when your gut screamed that something was wrong. But lately, something's shifting. You're starting to notice patterns you couldn't see before. You're replaying conversations and realizing, wait, that wasn't my fault. You're remembering incidents and suddenly understanding what actually happened, not the twisted version they fed you. It's like someone cleaned a window you didn't even know was dirty. This is God lifting the veil. I talked to a man, I'll call him Thomas, who described this moment perfectly. He said, it was like I'd been watching my life through a dirty windshield for 3 years. And one morning, I woke up, and it was just clear. I could see every manipulation, every lie, every time she'd twisted reality to make me the villain. It was overwhelming, but it was also the first time I felt sane in years. Here's what the fog lifting looks like in practice. You catch them in a lie, and instead of doubting yourself, you trust what you saw. You recognize the manipulation tactics as they're happening, not days later. You stop automatically accepting blame and start asking, wait, is this actually my fault? You remember who you were before this relationship and realize how far you've drifted. And you start feeling angry, not at yourself, but at what's been done to you. That anger, it's holy, it's righteous. It's the appropriate response to injustice that you've been suppressing for far too long. I've heard whispered confessions about this moment. Men who say things like, I suddenly saw her clearly, and I was terrified, not of her, but of how long I'd been blind. Men who realized they'd been defending their abuser to friends and family, genuinely believing the lies themselves. When the fog lifts, it's disorienting. You might feel worse before you feel better. You might grieve the time you lost, the self you abandoned, the reality you accepted. But that clarity, that's God giving you back your mind. That's the first step toward freedom, and it leads directly to the second sign, one that might surprise you. Sign number 2. Their mask is slipping in public when others finally start to see what you've always known. For so long, you felt alone in seeing the truth. To the outside world, they're charming, charismatic, the life of the party. Everyone loves them. When you've tried to explain what happens behind closed doors, people look at you with confusion, or worse, suspicion. Really? They seem so nice. Are you sure you're not overreacting? Maybe you're being too sensitive. And so you stopped trying to explain. You isolated yourself with a truth no one would believe. But lately, something's changing. Their mask is slipping, and other people are starting to notice. Maybe it happened at a family gathering. They made a cutting remark that others actually heard. Maybe it was at work. A colleague mentioned they seemed off or intense. Maybe a mutual friend quietly asked if everything was okay at home, because they witnessed something that didn't sit right. The narcissist is losing control of their public image. And that's not an accident. When God is moving you toward freedom, He often exposes the truth to others, not just to validate you, but to build the support system you'll need when you finally leave. Let me tell you about a situation I heard about. A woman, let's call her Rachel, had been telling her husband for years that his mother was manipulative and cruel behind closed doors. He defended his mother constantly. Rachel was too sensitive. Rachel was imagining things. Rachel needed to try harder. Then, at a holiday dinner, the mother slipped. In front of everyone, she made a vicious comment to Rachel, something she'd normally save for private moments. The whole table went silent, and for the first time, Rachel's husband saw what she'd been describing for years. One public moment undid years of private denial. This is what it looks like when God pulls back the curtain. Watch for these signs. People who previously defended the narcissist start expressing doubts. You notice others exchanging glances when the narcissist speaks or behaves a certain way. Friends or family approach you privately with concerns. The narcissist seems to be slipping up more, losing their temper publicly, making comments they can't take back. And people believe you now in ways they didn't before. Here's the gossip-level truth. Narcissists are exhausted by their own performance. Maintaining the mask takes enormous energy, and when God is dismantling their operation, He often does it by simply letting them tire out. They expose themselves. They overplay their hand. They reveal in a moment what took you years to understand. When others start seeing the truth, you're not crazy anymore. You have witnesses, and that changes everything. But the next sign might feel less like liberation and more like loss. Stay with me. Sign number 3, doors are closing, and it feels like punishment when God removes what you were clinging to. This is the sign that confuses people the most, because it doesn't feel like rescue. It feels like everything is falling apart. Maybe you just lost your job, the one that was keeping you financially tied to them. Maybe a living situation fell through, the one that made leaving feel impossible. Maybe a mutual friendship ended, one you were holding on to for stability. Maybe something you were counting on simply disappeared. And you're standing in the wreckage thinking, God, I asked for help. Why is everything getting worse? But here's what you can't see yet. God is closing doors that were keeping you trapped. Sometimes liberation looks like loss. Sometimes freedom requires burning the bridges you were too afraid to burn yourself. Here's what forced doors closing can look like. Financial arrangements suddenly shift, making the status quo impossible. Living situations become untenable through circumstances beyond your control. People you were relying on to stay comfortable become unavailable. Opportunities you were using as excuses to delay leaving evaporate. And the universe seems to be conspiring to make staying harder than going. I've heard this whispered by so many people. I didn't have the courage to leave, so life left for me. That's not punishment. That's mercy disguised as chaos. When God wants to move you and you won't move yourself, He'll shift the ground beneath your feet. It's uncomfortable. It's terrifying. But looking back, you'll see it was the only way. And this connects directly to the next sign, one about the people entering your life right when you need them most. Sign number 4. Unexpected allies are appearing when God sends reinforcements you didn't ask for. You felt alone in this for so long. The narcissist isolated you, systematically, strategically. They cut you off from friends who might see through them. They created distance with family who might support you. They made sure that when you looked around, the only person in your corner was them. And it worked. You felt trapped because you were trapped, in a prison made of loneliness. But lately, people are showing up. Maybe it's an old friend who reached out randomly after years of silence. Maybe it's a coworker who invited you to coffee and actually listened. Maybe it's a family member who called at exactly the right moment. Maybe it's a stranger, a counselor, a pastor, someone online, who said something that pierced through the fog. These aren't coincidences. These are reinforcements. When God is setting you free, He doesn't send you out alone. He rebuilds your support system while you're still in captivity, so when the walls come down, you have somewhere to go. Watch for these signs. People from your past resurface unexpectedly with warmth and support. New connections form that feel unusually deep, unusually fast. Someone offers help you didn't ask for, a place to stay, a job lead, a listening ear. You feel less alone than you have in months, even though your circumstances haven't changed yet. And conversations keep leading to the same themes: your worth, your options, your freedom. Here's what I've heard whispered. The right person showed up at exactly the right moment. If they'd come earlier, I wouldn't have been ready. If they'd come later, it might have been too late. God's timing is precise, and when allies start appearing, it's because He's assembling your escape team. But the next sign is internal, and it might be the most powerful of all. Sign number 5. Your peace is disappearing, and that's actually good when God makes captivity unbearable, so you'll finally move. This sounds backward, but hear me out. For a long time, you've been able to tolerate the intolerable. You've adapted, you've numbed, you've learned to survive in an environment that should have been unsurvivable. You found ways to make it bearable: denial, distraction, hope, excuses. But lately, you can't do it anymore. The things you used to tolerate now feel unbearable. The comments that used to roll off your back now sting. The patterns that used to feel normal now make your skin crawl. The relationship that used to feel complicated now just feels wrong. You're losing your ability to cope, and that's terrifying. But it's also God removing your tolerance for captivity. Here's the truth about humans. We can adapt to almost anything. Give us enough time, and we'll normalize abuse, rationalize mistreatment, find ways to survive circumstances that should have broken us. It's a gift. It's how we endure hardship. But it's also a curse, because it lets us stay in places we were never meant to stay. When God is moving you toward freedom, He often starts by stripping away your coping mechanisms. He removes the numbness. He amplifies the pain. He makes the prison feel like a prison again. Watch for these signs. Things that used to feel tolerable now feel excruciating. You're crying more, feeling more, reacting more than you used to. The numbing techniques, distraction, rationalization, avoidance, have stopped working. You feel restless in a way that won't go away no matter what you do. And staying feels harder than it ever has before. I've heard this confession so many times. I didn't leave because I got stronger. I left because I couldn't take it anymore. Staying became more painful than the fear of leaving. That's not weakness. That's God making the cage unbearable, so you'll finally break free. And this leads to perhaps the most supernatural sign of all. Sign number 6. You're dreaming of freedom, literally. When your spirit knows what your mind hasn't accepted. This one might sound strange, but stay with me. Have you been having dreams about leaving? Dreams about being free? Dreams where you're running, escaping, starting over. Dreams where you're living a life without them in it. Or maybe the dreams are symbolic. Dreams about open doors. Dreams about wide spaces. Dreams about breathing deeply. Dreams where something that was chasing you finally stops. Your subconscious is speaking, and your spirit knows something your conscious mind hasn't accepted yet. When God is preparing you for freedom, He often speaks through dreams. Not because He can't reach your waking mind, but because when you're awake, the narcissist's voice is loudest. When you're awake, you're busy surviving. When you're awake, you've built so many walls to cope that even divine messages struggle to get through. But when you sleep, your defenses are down, and God slips in. Watch for these signs: dreams about escape, freedom, open spaces, or new beginnings. Recurring dreams about running from something and finally getting away. Symbolic dreams, closed spaces becoming open, darkness turning to light. Waking up with clarity you didn't have when you went to sleep. And a sense, even after you wake, that the dream was telling you something important. Here's what's whispered among people who've been through this. I knew I was going to leave before I knew I was going to leave. My soul decided first. Dreams are the language of the spirit, and when your dreams are showing you freedom, it's because your deepest self is already reaching for it. Pay attention. Write them down. Your sleeping mind might be braver than your waking one, but there's one final sign, and it's the one that confirms all the others. Sign the 7. The fear is transforming into something else. When terror becomes holy determination. For so long, fear has kept you frozen. Fear of what they'll do if you leave. Fear of the smear campaign, the revenge, the chaos they'll create. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear of what people will think. Fear of failing. Fear of the unknown. The narcissist weaponized your fear. They trained you to believe that leaving would be worse than staying, that you couldn't survive without them, that the world outside this relationship was more dangerous than the world within it. And for a long time, that fear worked. It kept you paralyzed, compliant, trapped. But something is shifting. The fear is still there. You'd be foolish if it wasn't. But it's no longer the loudest voice. Something else is rising, something that feels like determination, something that whispers, I'd rather face the unknown than stay in this prison one more day. This is holy courage, and it doesn't come from you. It comes from God transforming your terror into fuel. Watch for these signs. The fear is present, but it's no longer paralyzing. You're starting to think, what if I left more than I could never leave? Determination is rising alongside the fear, not replacing it but matching it. You're making practical preparations, researching, saving, planning, even if you haven't told anyone. And there's a quiet voice saying, you can do this, you're ready. Here's what I've heard whispered. The bravest thing I ever did was done while I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving anyway. When your fear transforms, when it stops being a wall and starts being a warning flare as you walk toward freedom, that's the final sign. God isn't just setting you free. He's giving you the strength to walk through the door. Take a breath. If you recognize yourself in these signs, any of them, all of them, then I need you to understand something. You are not imagining this. You are not dramatic. You are not ungrateful or unforgiving or faithless. You are seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time in years, and what you're seeing is a divine intervention already in progress. One final thought. God doesn't just open doors. Sometimes He burns down the house you were too afraid to leave. Let that land.